People who grew up with doomsday prepper parents, what was it like? I'm a bit of a prepper myself, but just to the extent of having a 2-month food and a 1-month water supply. I live in Manila, and the idea of an 8+ earthquake that wrecks the infrastructure of a metropolitan area with 13 million people is the stuff of nightmares. We are sort of prepping by default. Recently we moved to a rural area in eastern Canada. There is a very real chance we might get snowed in without power. We are stocking food and building a new pantry to hold more. We are installing a wood stove. I've got a mid-sized generator that can run on propane and I'm stockpiling propane tanks to run it. I also have a portable propane heater that runs off the same tanks. We installed a propane range and have a large tank for that. We have our own well and I just installed a new filtration system for it. We have our own septic system this year. Next year I'm going to look into solar or wind turbines so we can generate some of our own power. We've been here 3 months and right now I think we could easily go 1 week snowed in without power. Ideally I'd like to get this to 3 weeks. This is what real preppers do. Prepare for the most likely scenario first, knowing you may not be able to get external resources. This makes me think of the mother of a friend of mine. She had a small room off the side of the kitchen, shelves filled floor to ceiling with tins. It wasn't about doomsday. She had starved as a child in Holland during World War II, aged around 5. She didn't do any other prepping. I don't believe she thought it would happen again. She was a smart, capable woman living a continent away from Holland by the time I met her. I suspect the tins were a psychological safety net, a way of soothing childhood trauma. Pretty common, yes. My grandparents did the same. They were born beginning of the 40s, lived in cities which got completely bombed. They went hungry for years at a very young age. The topic came never up, but the trauma made him buy stuff in bulk and keep absurd amounts of food in the house at all times. They put shelves in the living rooms from the ceiling to the floor and hid the whole shelf wall with a curtain. My grandmas had it easier. They grew up in the countryside and their mothers managed to always get some food from their own gardens. Bottles and bottles and bottles of water in the garage. My mom bought the bulk packages from Costco and stuffed them there. I wouldn't be surprised if there were over 100 plastic containers in there. The world's gonna end panic mentality mostly comes from my mom's side, and it usually happens in waves. Things will be chill for a while, and the all of a sudden packages with no electricity, hand crank radios and portable generators will show up at our door. She claims that she makes ambient purchases while half asleep, but I think she really just that paranoid. A few times, she's mentioned buying a cow for its milk, in case we're forced to live off the land or whatever, so we can still have milk. And after explaining to her that no, we absolutely do not have the room or faculties to take care of a whole cow, she starts up with the same line of questioning, but asking if we can get a goat instead. We don't even have a front or backyard. I think you mean ambient purchases, like Ambien the sleep drug. Not saying your mom isn't batso, but that will you up. Lots of documented cases of sleep binge eating and or driving that victims have no recollection of. I have had entire evenings that I don't really remember. I vaguely remember my wife and I driving through the drive-thru of a Burger King with munchies. One night giggling our off. We didn't have a car. Just remember, Ambien doesn't make you racist. I learned how to hunt when I was 6. For my 11th birthday, I learned how to make a bow and arrow with the contents of my hiking kit and caught a rabbit for lunch. I was then shown how to use said rabbit's bones and internal organs to fish, and we had trout and perch for dinner. My dad is of the mind that doomsday preppers who just stockpile food do idiots, because even if they survive the apocalypse all they're doing is turning themselves into particular fat swines for the inevitable bandits to look for. Better to be able to hunt and gather food. My doomsday kit is just a bug-out bag in my walk-in pantry. I like your father's train of thought. He taught you self-reliance and you could survive without the pre-packaged food and move without being weighed down too much. His plan sounds more reliable than most others, and didn't make your life weird. His dad just doesn't know how to scale. Most people don't realize how fast humans can straight up depopulate an entire region of wildlife when they get hungry. Historically, armies couldn't support themselves in any given place for more than a few days before they'd turn the area into a dead zone for dozens of miles around. And those armies were nothing compared to how many people are packed together today. Usually, the next thing silly preppers say is, "I know how to hunt," and city people don't. You don't have to know how to hunt for a drive hunt. That many people will eat an area barren simply because there's no safe place left for wildlife to hide. There won't be any trees left after a few months. We were always too poor to fully prepare for the end times, although my mom still believes they are coming. Fun fact: if you don't have food storage of your own, create a map of all the Mormons in your town so when goes down you can take theirs. This was actual advice from my mother. She grew up in Utah, and it's a well-known fact that Mormons are supposed to hold on to 7 years of food storage at all times in case of Jesus. It was also a plot point in an S. Monsieur Sterling post-apocalyptic novel that a group of people stumbled across an abandoned Mormon house, which set them up nicely for food for a bit. So yeah, make a Mormon friend for the end times. Utah woman kills entire Mormon family after power outage, claims she thought it was the end times. Utah woman killed attempting to rob Mormon family after power outage. Mormons know how to defend their. Here is a non-religious one. My dad was very freaked about Yellowstone exploding. He sat me down and said, "You and everyone you know is going to die under 4 feet of ash. We don't get out of here now." I must have been 11/12. Yup, we had lots of food that was thought to be shelf-life free. We also took hella family trips outside of the ash zone. Got to see a lot of the country from it. I have also developed paralyzing anxiety in my late 20s, but that's probably from a lot of other. Your story interests me the most. I have to ask, why not move? My dad stocked textiles, toiletries, non-perishables, and water to an extreme amount. Our entire basement was basically a bunker. It could be locked from the inside at both the top and the bottom of the stairs, and we had huge drums of potable water that probably stood to about stomach high on me now as an adult. We also kept old 2 liter bottles for non-potable that we stacked like wine on heavy shelves, as well as rice and dried beans in vacuumed sealed containers. He was constantly buying things at old surplus outlets, gas masks, iodide tablets, rucksacks, etc., and taught us how to make bullets using a shell cleaner and powder packer, like that one poster above mentioned. We also typically had about every few weeks a few days where we ate next to nothing, and were taught a lot of both local and non-local plants that could be edible and how to prepare them, as well as things that could be health beneficial and how to prepare them. We rarely got to go hunting, because of where we lived at the time, but he did teach us how to set various snares and traps, like figure fours and pitfalls, and any time one of our traps succeeded, he would use it as an opportunity to teach us how to clean and prepare meat not just for that day, but how to cut and dry it for future use. I have to say, knowing how to brain tan a rabbit skin is not something I ever expected to come up in conversation as an adult as much as it actually does. I like hearing about the hunting and foraging skills. I could see those actually being useful in a more realistic emergency. I grew up Southern Baptist. We were taught that the rapture was going to happen any day. Every night I was afraid to go to sleep because I might be raptured before I woke up. I wasn't going to get to grow up, get married or have children. As I went through my teenage years, I didn't plan for my future as I should have because we weren't going to be here next year. My mother never bought Christmas wrapping paper on sale because next Christmas wasn't going to come. If I knew then what I know now, I would have done many things differently. My BF grew up Jehovah's Witness and he said they constantly avoided planning anything in the future, because the end times were always imminently arriving. Every news item about wars, souring relations between countries, natural disasters, etc., would just reinforce it. Parents don't bother sending kids to college because it won't be needed when Jesus sets up the new system. Luckily he insisted on going to college and is no longer part of that religion. He still gets triggered occasionally when there's a lot of bad news going around. I always try to calm him whenever that happens. I grew up in that religion. The amount of damage it can do to a child is tough to describe. The organization actively telling you that college isn't necessary and actually evil is just one example of many. Your boyfriend is lucky he went to college. I went to community college but never finished. I always wonder what it would have been like if my parents stressed the importance of education the whole time I was growing up. Anytime I brought up college, it was met with the standard speech, "That time in your life would be great to give to Jesus. Consider becoming a missionary instead." Edit. Said husband instead of boyfriend. My stepdad kept every map he'd had so we could know the non-government roads, aka the ones that might be forested but not full of panicked, dead civilians in now road-blocking vehicles. He taught me to hunt, fish, and all the gross cleaning, butchering methods as well as how to forage. We canned everything and had a basement full of non-shelf expiring foods. Had a huge garden of our own. Also taught us how to make alcohol out of like anything because you will need a cocktail to get through an internet-free world. Honestly, it felt very normal, and we got some sweet skills that most don't have. I still suck at directions though. Was dope to make it through the mad cow disease breakout since all our meat was hunted or through butchers that weren't affected. I like that you learn skills to continue to provide for yourself and not rely on stocked up resources. Sounds way more practical. My mom always talked about the end and she bought all these survival kits and 3-year food supply packages and stuff. One day I told her that if God wanted us to die, he'd let us die and it wouldn't matter how many things she bought. I think she held up a little bit after that. My parents aren't doomsday preppers by any stretch of the imagination, but we did live in an area where getting to the grocery store would be difficult if it snowed in. As such, we always had a pantry full of home-canned stuff that we made together, and a huge vat of sauerkraut we make once a year when I go home for Christmas. Well, there was always food in the house. It was pretty much the same as any other normal family, I assume. We just went bulk shopping every few months. The only strange-ish thing is that we'd have a week out of every month that we'd have to kind of fast. We could have a pack of raisins and a bottle of water every day and that's all. What was the purpose of the fast? Serious, honest question. Might be so they can still function if they're forced to fast by lack of food. Like most people nowadays struggle to function after even like 1 or 2 days without food, even though you can survive for 3 weeks. Although going without food for long periods of time can lead to stunted growth in children.